Hey guys, it's Brio. Making this video today to talk about Jordan Peterson's Christianity. This is a really uh, in this is a subject I'm really interested in. I've probably spent the last, 1.5 years sort of studying it, uh, which is to say, listening to Jordan Peterson's lectures and like reading the books he recommends, um, because his view of religion and mythology and I guess what this title is called, Christianity, is very unique. And the way I'm going to like sort of explain it is break it into three parts. And the three parts are, one is what, because I grew up Christian, what my original Christian worldview and sort of, I guess you could call it axioms were. And what I would probably say the majority of what Christians most likely believe. Second is why I left and sort of the atheist framework I was operating in. And then the third, which is the sort of Jordan Peterson view on religion and how, and I'm not sure, if I would call myself a Christian, but how I sort of have a much more, I guess, what you call it, meaningful outlook on the world from, listening to his stuff. So yeah, I'll start with number one. I was raised Pentecostal, so that's like sort of part of the Protestant branch. And essentially what we believed is basically there was this God in this 10th dimensional space called heaven who created everything, and was the master and controller of everything. And there was also a guy called Satan who also lived in this weird, incomprehensible dimension in a place called hell. And he was like responsible for like the bad things in the world. And then there was Earth, which is in the middle. And basically what happened is God came, 2,000 years ago in the form of Christ to tell us the good news and say, okay, I've saved you guys. If you just believe in me, then you will go to paradise in heaven. And I'm not sure how it is in Catholicism or Orthodoxy or other Protestant branches, but the idea was it wasn't something like, okay, God's come, he's told us to do this stuff, and if we do all this stuff correctly, we'll get into heaven. It was more like God's already done this stuff by dying on the cross, and we merely just need to believe in him. And from believing in him, we would sort of be spurred on by this gratefulness and love from God to actually do good things in the world. Which is, they would say a lot of things like, essentially as Pentecostals, like, oh, we're not a religion, because religions, you have to do stuff to achieve grace in God's eyes, but God's already given us grace. Or I don't know, I'm not probably explaining it right, but yeah, that was the sort of the big revelation, and why a lot of them were like proud to be Christian, why they thought it was just a very different and, I'm not sure if you go revolutionary type of religion. And yeah, I believe the world was 6,000 years old. And essentially how this played out in my life is, it was just like, oh, okay, I just gotta maintain my belief until I die so I don't go into hell, and go into heaven instead. And there wasn't really anything beyond that. I suppose there's like this huge, it's implied that you have this huge like calling of, love and thankfulness that God saved you. That didn't really make sense to me. I always thought that, okay, maybe later in my life that would make sense to me. Now that I've sort of left, I guess I can criticize it more because, I left because, looking back on it now, I thought that way of looking at it is stupid, but, yeah, anyway. So that was sort of my first, worldview, or the narrative in which I oriented myself in the world. And what happened was, you grow up, go onto Reddit, see r/atheism, or you're just on YouTube and random videos recommend to you of Richard Dawkins, Christopher Hitchens. Started listening to them a lot, found them really interesting, opened my eyes to like a lot of arguments I'd never heard before. I always had as a Christian before that, it was just like you'd be stupid not to be a Christian. It's so obvious, like God, it's like there's so much evidence that God lived 2,000 years ago. It was like being non-Christian was like, oh, that's just a thing like insane people do. But this, listening to Richard Dawkins and all these arguments and sort of how science had sort of broken down a lot of these, beliefs that we took to be true. My faith, it wasn't an overnight thing, but, over the years, it's kept getting chipped down more and more. And I tried, I actually made more of an effort to stay a Christian than to leave. But I'd listen to, these talkers like John Lennox, Ravi Zacharias, and I just, deep down, just felt like their arguments were way worse. And so, I left eventually. And you can also call it motivated. Like, there is, you can't just say, oh, it's pure reason. There is an attraction with, the freedoms that come with atheism and the loss of responsibility. Because, you're trying to abide by all these rules in Christianity and you feel guilty when you don't abide by them. But then you go atheist and well, I'm free. But a good thing to know that, so side tangent, I don't think my life or the way I acted seriously changed from being Christian to non-Christian. And I'm not sure what to make of that. The reason I'm saying that is because later on when I talk about Jordan Peterson's version of Christianity, how it views the world, it matters far more how you act than what you say you believe or what you do. And because I wasn't acting a whole lot different, I'm not sure if I was ever Christian in the first place. Because if I truly believed that there was this omniscient God that watched everything I did and saved my life from eternal torture and hell into eternal paradise, I'm not sure if I would just be okay, live my life just generally normally. I think if I truly believe that deep down, I feel I would be professing on the streets every day yo guys, you gotta become Christian now or you're gonna be in hell forever. There's nothing more pressing and important than that. There was this thing that I think Nietzsche said, which there was only one true Christian, and that was Christ, because it just seems like he was the only one who seriously took the axioms that there is a God out there and truly lived that out. Truly believed that and truly acted it out. I guess you could make some argument for some saints or things like that. There are some incredible people that the way they acted in the world does conduce to that. But that's, a really big point to think about. Was I ever Christian to begin with? Or was I ever atheist to begin with? It's hard to know. But anyway, so my atheist worldview was basically a nihilistic one. So basically the world was sort of this huge accident. These laws of nature sort of created us, survival of the fittest was sort of this thing that carried us through to this extremely complicated state we are in now. So but I still had, and why I go back to the thing is I still acted like there was meaning in life. I was I still am into film, and I love art, I love music, I love video games, I love great stories. And there was something about these stories and art and beauty in the world that, connected with a deep part of my being and gave me very fulfilling meaning in life. So although I say my worldview or my logical worldview was nihilistic, the way I acted wasn't nihilistic, because if I truly thought it just meant nothing. And these, maybe, I'm not sure, like, I guess these draws of like beauty and art and stuff like that, they have an affecting thing pulling you forward. But no, like the underlying feeling behind it at the end of the day, it wasn't like, this is all for nothing, this is useless. It felt very deep down meaningful, and it was sort of like the star I was going towards. This brings me to what got me into, I guess, what you call Jordan Peterson's worldview. I don't really have a good name for this. I think you could say it's like Carl Jung's worldview or Nietzsche's worldview. I haven't read Nietzsche, I'm not too sure about that. But I'm just calling it Jordan Peterson's worldview or Christianity. So essentially what happened is I was really into film. I wanted to make films. I read a lot of books. Read Joseph Campbell's Hero of a Thousand Faces. Talked about the monomyth, which is the idea that the same way we evolve through time, stories evolve through time. So the stories that have lasted thousands of years are the ones that, like, there's 1 out of a billion stories that connected to the human psyche in such a profound way that people retold them over and over and over again throughout the ages, because they connect to them and compel them to tell it forward. And that there's one, that these stories reflect how our psyche works, and two, so they're sort of like a mirror to our psyche. Number two is these stories help us survive, because the humans that listen to the stories, who are attracted to the stories that help them survive. Yeah, I don't know how to explain that, but you get my point, right? So there's something in us that is attracted to these certain stories and not attracted to other stories, that find some stories compelling and other stories not compelling. The mechanism that makes stories compelling, if that mechanism selects stories that help us in turn live better in the world, that we are to survive longer, that means, that it's sort of a cycle. Like, okay, story that makes us survive longer, human interest or compulsion to hear and enjoy that story creates more stories that help us survive better, and then a better, more sophisticated way of determining which stories we like. Yeah, so on and so on. You get my point, hopefully. So that was just blew my mind, because it took, I had this atheist framework, but it took this atheist framework of, we have these religions that people follow. This is just some silly defect in our mind that we pursue, to why the heck do these stories last for thousands of years and compel literally billions of people, the far majority of the planet, even now, which is our most secular or most atheistic time in history, I think. I may be wrong, but I'm 90% sure on that. Like 6 billion out of the 7 billion people in the world are religious. Why is this such a universal part of our experience? So from that got me to reading, after reading Joseph Campbell's Hero of a Thousand Faces, got me listening back, because I heard Jordan Peterson before, listening to Jordan Peterson again. And then eventually I went through all these lectures like dozens of times, and eventually read his Maps of Meaning book. And the way I would explain Jordan Peterson's Christianity, because I think it's very ambiguous in some senses, is he explains the human psyche like a loose collection of spirits or sub-personalities. And if you've seen the movie Inside Out, there's all these, it's like sort of mini people inside this girl's head that all like sort of either fight or negotiate for control of how the girl acts. And it's essentially the same idea, far more complicated scale. So a way I would explain it is, take anger, for example. So there's a really good talk Jordan Peterson gave on this, and he like asked, like, first thing he started was like, what is older, you or anger? And the obvious answer is anger. People have been angry before you. And he describes, describing what ancient people thought of as spirits. He used anger as the example, and because they would say, okay, anger is something that possesses you, and well, why would they say that? And well, when you think about it, like when you're angry, it controls like what thoughts you have. So the thoughts that pop up in your mind of like if you just got that like sort of angry feeling in you, is actually, if you watch them, they're like sort of influenced by that angry feeling. Like you wouldn't have those thoughts unless you had that angry feeling. And then these in turn go on to influence, like sort of the thoughts influence like what goals you have, which is sort of like what narrative you're operating in, the sort of goal you're moving towards. That's like your narrative. So it's like operating, and the way you get those goals is it's dictating like what you see in the world. So if you ever seen that video of the gorilla experiment, a very famous experiment where you're asked to count how many times people pass this basketball around, and while you're counting it, this gorilla walks through the middle of the screen, and I think 50% of people don't see the gorilla because they're concentrating on the ball. And so anger also focuses like, because there's infinite information like in the universe. Like I could look at this wall for like the rest of my life, inspecting it and figuring out every little intricacy, how many different shades it has, what different molecules and everything. And so because there's infinite information, we need to cut out 99.9% of it and have focusing mechanisms that focus on what's important to our survival. And if we have like certain emotions that come on it, that influences what we focus on. So now we can see why people would think anger is something that possesses you, like a spirit, like some other entity has come in and possessed you, and it's something that transcends you. So it's not only in you, it goes above. It's like in the whole entire human population. I mean, there's probably 1 out of 10 billion people that don't feel anger or something, but like, you get what I mean. The same way we all have hands that are like ancient, even though this hand is only 24 years old. Hands in general have been around, I don't know how many millions, billions of years. Same thing with anger. It's something that has been around for all intents and purposes eternity, and it transcends, and it exists within most of the environment within you. So they would say like, so when the ancient people thought about gods, that have the god of anger, and it's not hard to see why. And then they would take that sort of pattern, so they'd take that sort of pattern of anger and see it in other things. So they'd think that like the alchemists would think that mercury and anger were sort of made of the same thing, because like mercury was red and hot like anger, and would attack and destroy things. And so it's sort of that, they're sort of just observing these patterns and seeing them in the world. So we have all these little sub-personalities, and they duke it out, trying to cooperate, sort of fighting against each other to see who gets control. That all combine together to make up our one personality at the top. Another way of explaining this is, let's take the desire hunger. You have the desire hunger, so okay, you haven't had food for a while. The hunger desire rises up and starts influencing your behavior more and more the longer you've gone without food. But also in that hunger is sort of its own mini sub-personalities, where you have the desire for savory food, or the desire for sweet food, or the desire for whatever flavors there are. And then these are all sort of competing. Okay, I've had sweet food recently. Okay, my desire for sweet food is down. Oh, I really want savory food. Oh, I really want this food. Oh, looking around in the environment around me. Oh wow, there's these cakes here. Now I really want cake. Or I see the ad for the McDonald's burger. I really want it. McDonald's burger. It's all. So the same way that those mini subpersonalities combine up to make the ultimate hunger subpersonality, these other subpersonalities, like you can have hunger and also your desire for social approval, sort of combine together and maybe fight with each other, or become compatible at the top, where so just say your hunger wants to eat that, burger, fries and milkshake, but the subpersonality that wants social approval doesn't want you to gain weight, so it wants to eat the salad, and so they duke it out, and maybe you get a Subway sandwich with some healthy chips and a kombucha instead, But some people's, their hunger or their hunger spirit is so high that it beats out the other one, and they've got a misaligned integration in that case. So that's a very simple way of explaining, and there's much more to it, how Jordan Peterson views the psyche. If you want to hear more on this, I would recommend watching mainly his Carl Jung lectures in his Maps of Meaning and Personality lectures. I think that explains this in a thorough way. I might link one down in the description. I think the 2014 one's good, or 2015. So, like hunger's subpersonalities, like sweet, sour, savory, combine up to make the larger hunger subpersonality. It's the same way regular subpersonalities like anger, happiness, need for love, etc., all combine and mix together and integrate into the human being at the top, being the one subpersonality of the human being. What Christ is, I think, is sort of the ultimate version, or ultimate, hierarchy, the ultimate organization of those spirits to make the one top spirit at the top. And Jordan Peterson goes through how he thinks this was sort of created, and it's sort of you have these tribes, and the tribes have admirable people who are successful, and the tribes that survive are the ones that see these admirable people and say, what about them is good, meaning it helps us survive and keeps the tribe surviving. Let's tell stories about those things so that the next generation or next people can learn those special, whatever you call them, traits to do better in the future. And what happens is, over time they have hundreds of these admirable people. They withdraw those unique attributes and form a sort of deity out of all those same attributes over those 100 admirable people. And then tribes get into conflict, or they integrate with each other, and through doing that, their sort of deities metaphorically fight, and they maybe come out the top with a combination of the two deities, sort of getting rid of a bit of both of them but making a stronger deity at the top. Or maybe one of the deities is just much better than the other tribes, so that one wins out, or whatever happens. And this happens over the hundreds of thousands of years, and then you get these world conquering sort of religions of where they've just done this so many times that they get that one sort of top deity or god at the top. And I think that's what he explains Christ as being. And I think that's also just a natural part of how the human psyche is formed, is that we like to pay attention to and imitate, I guess you call admirable people. Take for instance, who do we admire in society there? Of course you have those dumb things, the Kardashians or whatever, but for the most part, we admire sports stars like Kobe Bryant. We're constantly there's just this thing within us that we're just watching what they do. and like we'll even go out and like buy, they have like this certain brand of shoes on. Like, oh, I need to buy that brand of shoe because that'll make me a lot more like the person. And you can say, oh, that's us being dumb, but I think it's just like a really, strong part of our personality that's helped us. It's like really great for our survival, sort of being tricked into doing something that's probably shouldn't do. But I think Christ, or I guess you could say a lot of these like modern religions, is like just the ultimate version of that. And what they do is they bring societies to every week just look upon the ultimate ideal and sort of strive to be more like that, even though it's impossible. And this sort of orientates the society towards the highest ideal. And what the highest ideal is I'm not really, I think I would want to make videos in the future to try and explain this more. I want to make many more videos about this topic. But I think what that ultimate ideal is like, I think Jordan Peterson describes it as truth within love, transcending like everything. And most importantly, like what the image of Jesus on the cross is truth. Is it truth within love? Yeah, or love within truth. Either one. Is that transcending torture and death, which is sort of like the ultimate gods, you could say, and that being more powerful than that. And I think this brings me back to why I got into filmmaking in the first place when I was atheist. Is I watched the movie Arrival, and Arrival is exactly that, is truth and love for the world transcending the pain and grief of losing a daughter or losing a child. And that had such like emotional impact on me. I was looking at like, I sort of made it my North Star to like, I didn't like make movies that convey that feeling that I had when I watched that film, or art. So yeah, I think that gets to the end of explaining Jordan Peterson's Christianity. There's a lot more to explain, and I hope to do more so in the future, but I think that gives a decent overview. I think at the end I just want to talk about, I guess, what the difference is between this new way of looking at religion and the old religion I had. And I think mainly what it would be is, I think with this new way, he's combining the new enlightenment worldview with, and really looking at especially Christianity and how they integrate. And so I think the main points where I think there's like different is like the way he's using the word spirit, because I think with the word spirit implies a lot of, I guess, metaphysical claims that you can't prove through science. Whereas when the way he's talking about spirits, I feel like there's a lot of, I think he's not throwing out the extra metaphysical framework, but he's not using them to justify how spirits could work, how to view spirits in a scientific worldview. Like he talks about how, like he uses, I think that a lot of what his book Maps of Meaning, that's what it's about, is trying to see the framework as humans being made up of a collection of sub-personalities and going through, Jaak Panksepp and his neuroscience of rats and how we're like goal-oriented creatures and how our emotions map onto the goals we have and how that sort of acts like a mini sub-personality within us, and like justifying it through those means instead of saying, oh, like spirits exist because I just feel they exist because, with no scientific worldview. And I think a big point of difference as well is at the start of his book, Maps of Meaning, he says that the Bible isn't a historical or scientific book. And I think that a lot of the justification for the, Christianity being real or other religions being real is treating it like a scientific and historical book. And that's where most of the conflict has been between the new atheists and the Christian debate. And that's why I always thought the new atheist won. So that's why I left. But yeah, there's a lot to be discussed there. Please comment down below if you have any difference of opinion or want to add something. But yeah, thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe. I want to make more content like this in the future. So peace.